Show.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to episode 215 of the 580 Show. This week, we're joined by Niko Chaprales, aka Greek. Most people know you as Greek Goliath, but welcome to the show. Thanks for joining
In
us,
the
man.
in the strongman world, yeah, that's true. So
Is your life like? Because we're gonna talk about like some real life stuff this episode because you got some exciting stuff coming up. But like,
right.
is your life like completely split? Like your real life because your career is pretty interesting. Like you're over here as Niko with the boat stuff, and then you're over here as Greek Goliath, or are they like kind of merge at points?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely not a whole lot of crossover as far as people either know me like from one avenue of life, like most people in the fishing world like don't even know that I do strongman. They just know me as like the big guy. And I
Yeah,
feel like definitely more people in strongman know that I'm a commercial fisherman than people in fishing know that I'm a strongman. So,
yeah.
but yeah, it's definitely two very separate entities, I would say. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So Niko is a professional strongman, but he's also a professional fisherman. So, uh, I mean, let's talk about Harpoon Hunters first because I think it's really cool, and we'll talk
right.
about a bunch of strongman stuff. But so January 24th, which is Thursday or
Friday night.
Friday?
Yeah, Friday
Friday.
night.
So this upcoming Friday, because this will come out on Sunday the 19th, Harpoon Hunters is out on Discovery Channel. It's like right down. I showed my dad actually tonight because I had dinner with him, and he
Yeah.
was like, it's like could not be more down his alley, like Discovery Channel all the way. But so how did this kind of like transpire? How did it start? How did they come to you? You're one of the four captains, right?
Yeah, yeah. So basically going back 12, 13 years ago now, I've worked for Discovery before in the past. We did 3 shows for Shark Week back in the early 2010s, where we tagged great white sharks off of Cape Cod and did 3 different studies. And so I was already kind of like in their Rolodex. So they Pilgrim Productions, which is the company that made the show, they're the same guys that produce Wicked Tuna. So they wanted to do a show about harpoon fishing. So it's funny because my deckhand Thomas, who's my deckhand on my lobster boat, he showed me the ad for the casting call, and he was like, "This is us, right? Like this is right up our alley." And I was like, "Yeah, maybe I'll reach out." Thought about it, and like 2 days later, before I could even finish thinking about it, they called me, and they were like, "We're sending a scout to your harbor. Do you have time to meet with us?" So I was like, "Yeah, sure." So we did preliminary interviews, and they called me back like 3 weeks later, and they go, "We really want to make this show. We would like you to be a part of it, but we haven't sold the show yet." So the way it like works is that a production company like Pilgrim will have an idea for a show, and then it will go out to bid to like, for this kind of show, you go like Discovery, Animal Planet, Nat Geo, and whoever bids the most, usually more than likely will get the show. So they came to me in February, Pilgrim, and they were like, "We need to make what's called a sizzle reel for to show all these different networks." So we were out there in February, basically pretending to harpoon fish in the freezing cold. And we were trying to make it like it was June. So I'm wearing a t-shirt and it's like 10 degrees out and it's freezing. And so we made the sizzle. And I was at the Olympic City Pro last year in Colorado when my producer called me, and he was just like, "Great news. Discovery picked up the show. So we're going to be filming this summer." And it all just kind of snowballed from there, man. And
That's
it was a
that's
really cool
amazing.
experience. So
Yeah, that's amazing. How long was so I'm assuming what fishing like I mean so you live up near the Cape, right?
yeah, I'm,
So
I'm literally right at the bridge. So
so so what's your like season? Like right now it's freezing. Like do you do anything for fishing in when it's cold out or the boat's just out of the water?
So the thing with harpoon fishing is that it's the last derby style fishery in America. So like for example, like Deadliest Catch when they first started doing the show, there was a total quota for crab, and all the boats were going after the same quota. Then for like safety reasons and whatnot, they gave each boat their individual quota to catch at their leisure. So it was no longer a derby style fishery, you know? So harpooning bluefin is like that now, where we have 70 total tons, which these fish are anywhere between 300 to 1,000 pounds. So 70 tons really isn't that much. You know, it's two, three, maybe 400 fish between the whole fleet. So the season starts on June 1st, which is when we started filming. They got here like the last week in May, rigged up the boats. We did some camera testing and whatnot. And then June 1st was the first day of the season. And it just so happened that this year, the season lasted 7 weeks. The quota lasted 7 weeks. So we wrapped up around July 17th or July 19th, something like that. But that's kind of like, that's the risky thing about trying to film a reality series like this, where the government doesn't care that we're filming a show. If the quota gets caught in 3 weeks, then we're done filming. So there was a lot of pressure to perform and catch fish right away for them to be able to get the content that they needed to create the show.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Is it something, is it a show where there's a potential for like season two and beyond, or are they aiming for like a one
uh,
season thing?
Dude, I want forget about season 2. I want season 10,
Like,
brother. You know,
yeah, like
this
end
is
up like
like,
the deadliest. You said deadliest catch. That's like one of my
yeah,
dad's favorite shows ever.
yeah. I
So
mean,
like,
this is definitely something that has the potential to be really big. I mean,
yeah,
Discovery loves it. It's funny because so this whole week I've been doing like radio interviews with different media outlets, and Discovery gave them episode 1 and 2 to see, to ask me questions about, and I haven't seen it yet. So they're asking me questions about the
oh
episode.
wow,
Yeah, I haven't seen a thing, so it's kind of cool, which I like it like that, because when I watched the first episode, like I want to be able to watch it with my family and my friends, and be like surprised about what's going to happen, you
yeah,
know? So, but
yeah.
we got like the Spark Notes version from the producer about like what they're going to talk about. So I kind of know the basic outline of the show, but as far as actually seeing it, I haven't seen it yet. So I'm just as excited as everybody else to actually see the finished product. So it's
Yeah,
really cool and really exciting.
that's really cool. Like yeah, it's just so funny because it's reality TV, but it's all about what your edit comes through like, right? So it's like you could come off
Yeah,
as this like, I mean, I don't know how you are as a captain, but like because you're a super nice guy just talking to you here, but like, when you're at work, you can be different and there's emotions and stuff. So it's like they spend so much time filming, but it's got to be in this like short condensed episode. So what's gonna be in and what's not gonna be in, and that's so
yeah.
interesting.
I mean, the crazy thing is, so we had so on Wicked Tuna, where they use rods and reels to catch fish instead of harpoons. They have one cameraman with like a moving camera, and then they have, I think, 4 or 5 different stationary GoPros set up around the boat. Just the nature of harpooning being that you have to go out on the pulpit in the front of the boat and like throw the spear. There's a lot more, like you can't just have cameras on the deck of the boat. You have to have every angle of the boat covered. So we had 11 or 12 fixed GoPros, 2 cameramen with moving cameras, and a drone guy. So we had,
Wow.
for every hour of that we were on the water, there was 13 hours of footage to review. So they
Yeah.
shot like 8,000 hours to make the first season is 9 episodes. They're 9 42-minute episodes. So they shot all that to make nine
For
42-minute
yeah.
episodes. So
Yeah,
it was,
that's crazy.
yeah. I
And
mean, the editors are just like I mean, their job must be so monotonous and time consuming to make, pick out all the good stuff and make it, into a viable show. And I mean, the way that I fish, I mean, the reason that I'm in Strongman is because I'm competitive and I want to be the best. And I'm exactly the same way, when I'm fishing, especially, if the world's going to see this. I mean, I don't want them to think that we're a bunch of scrubs out there. I want to be the top boat and I want to be the top earner. So, and that's just kind of like, I learned how to harpoon fish from my father, and my father was super competitive. And that's kind of like where I learn. I mean, I was on the back of a boat since I was 9, so that's kind of where I got like my work ethic and my competitive edge was just watching him want to be the top boat in the fleet my whole life. And, second was never acceptable. It's just, you're either the best or you're not. So,
Yeah.
so it's definitely interesting to see that play out in the show. And, yeah, I don't want to give too much away, but it's a good watch. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I really urge people, and we're going to talk. I got a couple more questions still because I want to circle back to a couple things, but we will talk about strength sports, I promise. But this
yeah,
is
man,
like
no problem.
this is super interesting to me. Okay. So I was watching some videos before this, like about
Mhm.
harpooning, and
Right.
I'm a safety guy for a living. Like that's what I do is my full-time job. I own a gym as
Okay.
well. But so like you mentioned like the different degree of it's I mean I don't know. You might say it's safe because you've been doing it for so long, but to
Right.
the average person, like an average person would say strongman probably isn't safe, but to us it's deadlifting and it's like you do it and there's a way to do it as safe as possible. When I see you're out on like the front of the boat, like way out there with like this harpoon, it's how do you manage that with like are there I mean, I'm sure there's safety regulations, but like how does this like how do you I don't know. I'm just so curious like
Uh, yeah, I mean, we don't really get too many visits from OSHA out in the out in the
yeah.
middle of you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um, it's honestly it's something that I've been doing ever since I was a kid. So like the
yeah.
safety aspect of it, like, yeah, I mean, I guess, running out 20 feet on a balance beam out to the front of the boat probably isn't the safest thing, but it's just something that I've done a million times,
Yeah. Yeah,
just like, I mean,
that was kind of my question. It's like, yeah, it's just second nature to you at this point, right?
yeah, I mean, and so the most dangerous aspect of harpooning in modern day harpooning is the fact that since we have such a limited quota, we are really trying to fish on quality and get the highest price per pound for our fish. And a huge aspect of the way that we do that is when you fight a fish with a rod, the fish bites the hook and takes the line, and you're reeling the fish in, and it takes, a half an hour, sometimes up to 4 or 5 hours to reel the fish in. And that whole time, the fish is, it's fighting, it's heating up, it's building up lactic acid in the muscle tissue. And if you fight a fish for too long, the quality of the fish goes down. So the fish will literally near the spine, you'll see like a really dark red meat. And we call that the burn. That's what you don't want because that decreases the quality of the fish. So we use electric harpoons. So when we spear the fish, the guy driving the boat up in the tower, there's a red button that once I spear the fish, he hits that button and that sends a charge that kills the fish instantly. So the fish doesn't struggle, the fish dies right away. And if you compare harpoon bluefin with rod and reel bluefin, when you cut them open, you can see the difference in the color of the meat. Harpoon bluefin almost looks like watermelon, where like rod and reel bluefin will look like a medium rare steak. It's a
Mhm.
lot darker of a red color, and that's what our customers, the buyers that we deal with, they really want to see that light pink translucent color because this stuff's all going off for premium grade sushi meat. And when you get a sushi roll, like the last thing you want to do is look down and see like a beet red piece of crap on your plate, So,
Yeah.
so the fact that we're dealing with electric harpoons, the biggest danger, of course, is I'm holding that spear as we're going up on the fish, and if that wheelman makes a mistake, or because he's working the throttle, he's working the gear, the steering wheel, and then he has to hit the button. It's a lot to do, and he's also keeping his eyes on the fish the whole time to put me in that position to get the best shot. So he has to do all that as second nature without looking down, looking up, looking all around, and you have to really have a lot of trust in your wheelman because if he slips and hits that button, it could be all over. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's really I mean there have been a few guys that have gotten shocked really really bad, and so far, knock on wood, that's never happened to me. But we're gonna try really hard to keep it that way. So
Yeah. So the name Easy Does It, was that something from your father, or like was that the boat name, or is that something that came along later?
So the boat was built in 1982, right? And my father always had the reputation of being like the guy with the nicest boats in the fleet. Like he was meticulous with, we would clean the boats for 2 3 hours every day. Like there wasn't a drop of blood left in the boat. We'd like, I mean, he was just like Captain Bleach, man. There was no fish smell on the boats at all. Whether we were tuna fishing, cod fishing, lobstering, we just kept those boats absolutely immaculate. So he the guy that built the boat, his name was Vander Forbes, and my father ran the boat for him for like 3 years. And he decided to buy the boat for himself in like 1984, 1985, which was a year before I was even born. And it's funny because I never knew this, and I don't even know if he knew this, but apparently Easy Does It is like the slogan for AA. So everybody always asks me like, "Hey man, you got a drinking problem?" And I'm like, "No, I don't even drink." And they're like, "Oh, just the name of your boat, Easy Does It, is the Alcoholics Anonymous slogan." And I'm like, "Oh, I had no idea." So for anybody listening, like, no, that's not like a little wink nod thing. It was just what the original dude named the boat. And it's also, you know, my father was a super like superstitious guy, and you never change the name of a boat. That's like the worst thing you can do. So you
Yeah.
always have to keep the name of the boat, and it's there's a ton of superstitious things, but that's definitely one of them. So once he bought the boat, there was no way that he was going to change the name. We were just going to roll with it, and it's worked out pretty well. So
Yeah. Well, that's so interesting. I feel like I could ask about that stuff forever, but we'll get into some lifting stuff. What time does the episode air on the 24th on Discovery?
it's not 9 p.m. on Friday the
9 p.m.
24th.
So
Yep.
be sure to tune in. I mean, if you're watching on YouTube, you guys can see Niko's Instagram. It's just at Greek Goliath. Make sure you guys follow him because he'll be posting stuff. And you have a page specifically for the fishing
Yeah.
stuff as well.
The
So,
other one's at FV Easy Does It. So
yep.
it's
Yeah.
it's tagged on my lifting page too. Really easy to find.
Yep.
So
Yeah. So we'll tag them both here. They'll both be in the description of the pod as well. So,
cool.
um, but so you really came over to strongman from powerlifting, from
Hmm.
what I could see. What made you originally even get into powerlifting? Like coming from a fisher, is it
Oh,
just fall
geez.
into your lap?
I mean, so I've always been kind of obsessed with like strength. Like even when I was a little kid, 3, 4, 5 years old, like I was always drawn to like in the comics, like I would love like the characters like Hulk, Juggernaut, Bane, like the big muscly dudes. So I always wanted to lift weights. Um, so when I was in high school, there was a weightlifting team. Unfortunately, I went to a really small high school, so there was only 4 spots open on the team, and I was the fifth guy to sign up. So the coach said to me, he was just like, "Look, um, this stuff's really hard, so I guarantee you that like one of these 4 guys is probably going to quit. So you're like the first alternate, right?" So I went home and I said to my mother, I was like, "Yeah, I didn't get on the weightlifting team, but I'm like the first alternate. So I'm just going to wait for a spot to open up." And my mother was like, "Well, you're not just going to sit around and do nothing. So you got to sign up for something." And at that point, since everybody had already signed up for everything, the only 2 options were either soccer or cross country running. And I'm like, "Oh, god
Oh
damn."
man.
Yeah, yeah. So I was like, so I picked cross country because I'm like, at least I'll like stay in shape and I'll be ready for. So literally like 2 weeks after I signed up for cross country, a spot opened up on the weightlifting team. So I came home and again I told my mother, I'm like, "Sweet, spots opened up on the weightlifting team. I'm gonna quit cross country and I'm gonna start lifting weights." And she was like, "Nope, you made a commitment to the cross country team. You have to finish that out." So for like the next 7 weeks, I did both. It was the hardest point in my life because I would run right after school and would usually run like a 5K, like three miles, and then I would go to the gym and I'd lift for like 2 or 3 hours. I was so beat after every day. I'd get home from practice and I would just like I'd go to bed at like 7 o'clock, just completely exhausted.
You were doing
Um,
CrossFit before it was cool. You're doing like
yeah,
the long distance
exactly,
running and
100%.
yeah.
So so we basically, when I say weightlifting team, like a lot of people think it was like Olympic, but it was basically like a club more than a team. And we were just doing really basic bodybuilding stuff. And I trained at a place called R&R Fitness. It was a little hole in the wall gym in Hyannis on Cape Cod. And these two dudes that went to the gym, they kind of pulled me aside and they were like, "Hey kid," I was like 13, 14 years old at the time. And they were like, "You're way stronger than your friends. You should come powerlift with us." And one of those guys, his name's Joe Gorgon. He's one of my best friends to this day. So I started doing powerlifting with them. And of course, after like 3 months, I was like, "I want to do my first meet. I want to do my first meet." And they were like, "Nope, you're not ready. Like, you got to learn how to do everything right." And like, because when we take you to a show, you're a representation of us and we want you to do well and like represent. And I was like, "All right, cool." So I did my first show. They made me do powerlifting for 2 years before they let me sign up for a meet. So, which is funny because like I feel like everybody's so. I hate to sound like the old salt, but like everybody wants everything so instantaneous these days, and no one's willing to like put the work in long term to be good at something before they just do it. Um, so I had my first meet when I was 17 years old. It was the New England Raw Powerlifting Championships, and I won the teen class. And then the next year, I was 18 and competed in the men's 275 class and won the men's class at the national level at 18 years old. And after that, man, I was hooked. And
Yeah.
I'm like, this is awesome. This is what I want to do. And I just kept training and I kept getting better and better. And I mean, I did it for so long. I'm gonna mix up my years at some point here, but it's funny because as I met people like further down the road, like when I met Shane Hunt for the first time, what I thought was the first time, we were just shooting the shit, and he was like, "Yeah, I did this meet in 2012 in Florida," and I'm like, "Wait a minute." I did that meet, and we're like, and then we look back on the score sheet, and we're like, "Holy shit!" I mean, Shane's a lot younger than me, so he was like, 14 at the time. It was one of his first meets, but yeah. So my first national title that I won was in the APA. I want to say it was like 2013 or 2014, and I always trained super raw. So I won nationals without not even wearing a belt. And the dude, and I competed in the 308s, and the dude who won the super heavies, his name was Dominic Matrana. He pulled me aside and he's just like, "Hey, bud, like, why don't you try like a belt and some knee wraps and really see what
Hmm.
you can do?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't know, I'm good." And so he gave me his belt and he's like, "No, no, really, like try it out, like try it out." And I was like, "Oh wow, this feels a lot different." So and then I just kind of kept competing all the way up to the point where in 2016 I qualified for IPL Worlds and won that world title in the 308 with wraps class. And then to be honest, after that, I just kind of I had gone on this 15-year odyssey in powerlifting to win a world title, and I finished that, and I was like, all right, well, I checked that box, and it just so happened that at Worlds I tore my right rotator at Worlds on my second bench attempt, and yeah, that's kind of what brought me into strongman. Was I did that, I checked the box, and then I just decided, I'm like, well, I want to try something new. And I had to take some time off to, let my shoulder heal. And then Derek Poundstone actually got me into strongman because I used to train at his
Oh
gym
wow.
down in Waterbury, Connecticut. And he was like, you should try strongman. You should let me coach you. And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? And so I started training strongman, and I was supposed to have my first show in 2019. It was going to be New York's Strongest Man, and then COVID hit and everything shut down. So, which sucked because I was like, man, I can't wait to try this new sport and everything. And then everything shuts down. So I've really been in strongman a relatively short period of time.
Yeah.
in comparison to my powerlifting career, you know? So,
Right, right. You know what's funny is like, just to circle back to the beginning of the story, when you were 15 and you had to wait till you were 17 to compete. I don't have the numbers, I'm just speculating, but I would think like 2 years. It's funny because nowadays that's actually probably longer than the shelf life kids last, like in powerlifting because of
oh,
like,
100%. Yeah.
because it like starts to get harder after a couple years and then they just
Right.
get a girlfriend and have a job and they think it's too hard to train. So that's just funny. I think that's really cool to your story that you had to wait because so many people just want to go do it and get their total on the board and
Yeah. I
like,
mean, that's not
yeah,
even really like, that's not even like, like a kid thing. Like there's plenty of
yeah,
dudes in their mid 20s that like, this is like their thing. And I'm not like, I mean, God knows I don't mind shitting on people publicly. Like that's
yeah,
what
yeah,
I do.
sure.
But I'm not shitting on people in this particular instance. But I mean, especially in the sport of powerlifting, like I've seen so many guys come and go, and like really good guys too. Like I mean, I'm talking like the Lily Bridges, Brandon Allen,
Yeah,
Dominic Manici. Like those guys were all like the next big thing. And
yeah,
I mean, I don't want to say they were a flash in the pan, but like they burned hard and bright for 2 or 3 years, and now like they're gone. So
yeah,
I've kind of taken the more moderate approach where I'm just kind of like steadily climbing slowly. And I mean, I guess that's the key to longevity because I mean, I've been lifting now. I'm 38, which means I've been lifting for 24 years. And I mean, I've definitely picked up a few injuries in the past 5 years or so, but I'm still healthy enough to compete at a pretty high level. So I
yeah.
think that, I'd rather smolder and have a really long career than burn bright and be done in two.
Yeah,
So
for sure. No, that's interesting because you mentioned like some of the guys. Obviously, the Lillibridges were huge, but I was a big Brandon Allen fan when I was like
mhm.
powerlifting in college, and he was a pull away from I think winning the big dogs, and he dropped the pull at lockout, or maybe it was like second place or something. But he missed like
Yeah,
a huge payout because he missed a deadlift. Like, remember that by like an
yeah.
inch
It
at
was it was it was
lockout.
$40,000 he missed out on
Yeah.
because his hand opened up, and
Oh,
he was actually so he was in third going into the deadlifts, and Odell was in second, and Brandon only needed like 15 pounds to beat Odell and take second, which would have been like 15 grand. But Brandon was like, I remember him talking about this. He was like, if I'm in third, I'm going to take what I need to win the meet. I'm not just going to jump Odell because I have too much respect for him to just chip him like that.
yeah,
So
yeah.
Brandon definitely, I always had a lot of respect for Brandon because like he was like a really honorable lifter. He doesn't just like chip people by like a kilo like Lucas Hatton does these days. But anyway,
No, and you kind of mentioned like you don't mind publicly calling people out, but you
not
have
at
like
all.
the uncanny ability on Instagram to anyone that follows Niko is like some people have to try to like rage post if that I
Mhm.
think that's what they call it. But like you have like the uncanny ability to post something and it like garners attention because it's a touchy subject or a controversial subject in strongman, and I think that's like the best. It's a good I'm giving you a compliment because it means that you can draw engagement naturally, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean it's crazy because a lot of things that I talk about, like I'm not even trying to be controversial or like garner
Yeah,
attention,
right.
but I mean people lose their fucking minds over shit, and I mean it's just like at last year's Arnold Am. I mean, I just made a post about how like I was super disappointed that I didn't qualify for the show because there was a max Hummer tire deadlift, and I was just like, man, I'd love a crack at that. I think I do really well. And just in saying that, like people lost their fucking minds, and I'm just like, is that really that big of like a stretch to say that I would do good on a Hummer tire deadlift? I mean, I'm not really good at a whole lot of things, but like I don't think that's very much of a controversial statement to make. And I was pissed because the one of the other events was max sandbag to shoulder, which I have the unofficial world record in. So I was just like,
Well,
shit, would have been a really good show for me. And people
yeah,
were like, how dare you say you would have done good in a show that you're not even doing? And I'm like, sorry, boys.
yeah.
But yeah, I've honestly, I've never been afraid to rub people the wrong way because I've always been of the aspect of regardless of if people are talking good about you or talking bad about you, they're still talking about you. So my job's done, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's funny because you talked about the dichotomy between like fishing and strongman. And it's funny because you said your words exactly as you said strongman and real life and real
Yeah.
life,
Yes.
I have my circle of actual real life friends that I would like, you know, if they called me at 2 in the morning, I would take somebody to the woodshed with. And not that I don't have, you know, really good, I've cultivated great friendships in powerlifting and strongman. But like, as far as people's general opinion of me in the sport, as far as a person, I really don't give a fuck. And I know that sounds like weird because it's not that I don't give a fuck about my reputation, but I don't need to be liked by everybody. I don't care about people's opinions on me. I know what I can do. I know my abilities. And if someone says I'm an asshole, that doesn't take a pound off my deadlift, doesn't take a pound off my squat, and doesn't cost me a minute of sleep. So, I mean, people can have their opinions, and quite frankly, as long as you tune in and listen to me talk, I win. So it's all good.
It's like that old, remember Pete Weber, the old great bowler? He has that famous quote. He's like, hate me or love me, you watched. And that's all that
Absolutely, man.
matters. That's what
He
that
was
just
a
reminded me
madman, dude. He was like
of.
bowling's bad boy. He's this
Dude, he
little
was
like
awesome.
dude. He was like
He,
160 pounds soaking wet, and he'd go
yeah,
nuts every match. It was awesome.
yeah. He actually, there's like the famous clip, like, who do you think you are? I am. And he's
I
like talking to
am,
someone in the
yeah.
crowd. He made that guy up. It's a fictitious person that he created to motivate himself. There's like a documentary on it on ESPN. That dude was awesome. Like
Well,
it's cool. It's hard to do bowling and look cool, especially when you're like 140 pounds and like
yeah,
you're
right.
wearing and he did it. So like,
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, like you had a post, was it yesterday? Because I reposted it, but it was about the two overheads, because there's two overheads in a show, and
Right.
I'm a way better deadlifter, so I'm in the same
Right.
probably I'm a little bit biased as well. But
Mm-hmm.
it does frustrate me because people will put two overheads in an event and then, but if you would put two deadlifts in an event, everyone would lose their shit. But you put
Right.
two overheads in, no one bats an eye. And I think
Right.
part of it's the laziness because it's the easiest event to run in strongman, like
Mm-hmm.
for the promoters and volunteers. And, I got a couple messages back like, well, if you're a better deadlifter, you're better at farmer stones and other events. That's not necessarily true at all. There's people that are I mean, it might, but if you actually look at it, like, okay, um, like Andrew Clayton, not a great deadlifter, really good stone loader. The
Well,
you
yeah, I was
know,
just about. I mean, you could look at. I mean, even you look at some of the best deadlifters in the world. I mean, Bobby Thompson pulls 1,000 pounds. He's a terrible stone loader. And
yeah,
then
exactly.
conversely, you look at like Max Boudreau, who's a terrible deadlifter, but he'll kill anyone in like power stairs or stones. So it does that. There's really,
It's
I don't want to say there's no correlation, but just because you're a good deadlifter does not mean there's
well,
carryover to everything. You know?
yeah, and you can say it about almost any event. Like I know people that are really, really great at farmers,
Right.
but aren't great at deadlifting. And
Right.
it doesn't make that much sense to me, but it is true. So that was just an example of a post you had that like pisses people off a little bit, but I love
Yeah.
it. You know. So you mentioned when Derek Poundstone was kind of the one that got you into strongman, and you're a competitor, you also coach people. Who have been kind of like some of your other, I know you've done some stuff with Rob Kearney.
Mhm.
Um, who have been some other like influences for you and just like maybe even before you officially started, people you like to watch, go back and watch, you still watch and learn from, like who are some of those people?
Yeah. I mean, as far as my coaching style, I kind of I think it's funny because there, in my opinion, there's no right or wrong way to do this. For the most part, there's different theories and there's different protocols and different structures. And for a lot of my athletes, like I use similar things for people with similar body types and whatnot. But you really have to be able. What makes a good coach to me is being able to look at an athlete as an individual and cater to them for their needs, you know? And I think I picked up a lot of different stuff along the way where, you know, what I really learned most from Derek was just, you know, boots on the ground, shut up and do it. And that, I mean, his famous quote is, you know, what's the fucking deal? You're not weak. Your ability to eat shit just sucks, you know? Because like a lot of people, it's not that they don't have their mind quits long before their body does, you know? And that was always Derek's thing. And that's probably why Derek had a relatively short career, is that he would just push his mind past the point of absolute insanity to perform these just grueling, ridiculous things. There's a quick story. I was actually training with Derek and Rob at Springfield College one time, and we'd done our deadlifts for the day, and we did belt squats as an accessory, and we'd work up to like 660 on the belt squat, right? And Derek goes first, and he belts in, and he just starts squatting, right? And he's squatting, and he's squatting, and he's still squatting, to the point where my wife went to the bathroom and she came back and she's like, is this still the same set? And I'm like, yep. So he literally squats for like 2 straight minutes, racks it. And I look at him and I'm just like, how many reps was that? And he's just like, oh, I never kiss and tell. Now it's your turn. And I'm like, oh my God. So I belt in, and I'm just like, you know, you're training with Derek Poundstone and Rob Kearney. You gotta go for it, you know? So I had 50 in my head for some reason. I don't know why, but I'm just like, that's gotta be enough to beat him, you know? And I start squatting, and like right around rep 15, my quads start cramping up, and I'm like, shit. So then I go down in the hole to stretch out my quads, and then my hamstrings start cramping up around like rep 25. So I'm in constant pain no matter where I am in the motion. And Derek's just sitting there like screaming in my ear. He's like, don't let your mind quit before your body. And so the last like 10 reps were just absolute grinders. And I got to the amount of reps that I got to, and I racked it. And I looked at Derek and I'm like, okay, how many reps do you get? And he's like, I got 50. And I go, I got 51. And that was like one of the, even though it was like in a little hole in the wall gym in the middle of Springfield, that was like one of my most proudest achievements, because I've always really looked up to Derek as a competitor. And then I unbelt myself and I try to walk away, and like my legs just give out. And then I look at Rob, and Rob's just like, nope, I'm not doing that. So, and then, but the funny ending to that story is, I was totally toast. Like I could barely walk. Derek then did Zercher walking lunges for like another half an hour. And I'm just like, all right, you win that battle, dude. So
yeah, you won the battle. He won the war.
Yeah, exactly.
That
So,
workout.
And then, you know, I've always kind of been a student of the game. So I took a lot away from Brandon Lilly's cube method from powerlifting. I incorporate a lot of that.
Yeah.
You know, I did a couple Dan Green Boss Barbell seminars. So I use a lot of his stuff. Actually, I mean, recently, due to the success of all of his athletes, I've been talking to Alec Jose a lot about like what he does, you know, because I mean, I think the reason that Alec's athletes do so well is because he takes, when you look at strength athletes, he takes the athlete just as seriously as the strength, you know? And especially the direction that the sport is heading right now, I think that's super important to make sure that, you know, you have that athletic background and that athletic ability to be able to, because a lot of times, especially in the open class, these guys just, they don't have the agility, they don't have the speed, and they don't have the endurance. And the guys that have things like that, you know, like Nick Guardione is a perfect example. You know, he's big, he's strong, he's fast. He really doesn't have any like holes. And just the fact that, you know, he's, you know, 6'5" and 340, and he moves like a middleweight, you know, he won OSG because he's a complete athlete. So, you know, I try to take all those aspects and combine them and, apply them to my athletes individually as well as I can. So that's kind of how I approach my coaching style.
Yeah, yeah. I think strongman is still relatively new in the new like kind of
Yeah.
like so I think it's just an ever evolving, like you look at the MST guys, they have done a lot with like
Mhm.
kind of evolving, coming up with some new stuff. And like, you see Lucas Hatton the other day. I can't remember when he posted this, but he's doing 10 cals on the assault bike into
Yeah.
the Australian Oak. And
Yeah.
and I think that's so cool because it looks silly, right? And
Right.
actually, I think Lucas, to my knowledge, is the only one that's ever put an assault bike in an actual show. Because I think like
Right.
2 or 3 years ago he had that at the Rainier. But you're like, man, you got this freaking dude that looks like the elephant on the unicycle at the car at the the
Yeah.
circus. But it makes so much sense because he's trying to do in a at the end of a press medley a log, and that's where his
Right.
heart rate is going to be, presumably. And
Hmm.
then so it's so clever. Like I make notes
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And I think that's, people shit on like that there's so many coaches now and everyone offers coaching and stuff. And like, yeah, some people probably aren't maybe that qualified or don't have enough skin in the game. But all that's gonna siphon out. Like the bullshit's gonna siphon out regardless. What I think about being so cool, there's so many coaches now, is that we have social media and we can talk and learn from each other. It's a
Yeah.
really cool thing.
I mean, that's probably, when you look at the fact that, just 25 years ago, when I was relatively new in powerlifting, I had to like, go to Borders Books and wait for
Yeah.
Powerlifting USA magazine to come out to read the monthly issue of Powerlifting USA to like get the new protocol and figure out what the new, you know what I mean? And now it's like
Yeah.
literally at our fingertips. And, I do think that the bane of a lot of coaches is um you have to know what you don't know, and you need to be able to admit where you may not have the expertise that you need, which, up here in the Northeast, we have so many great athletes where, if I have like I'm not the best circus dumbbell presser. So I have that network where if I have, a question about prepping somebody for that, like I can call Rob, I can call Nick Canby, I can call a plethora of dudes that I've trained with and worked with in the past, and vice versa goes for a lot of people on, on deadlifts. If they have an athlete that may be struggling in the deadlift, they'll shoot me their protocol and be like, what do you see anything? Like maybe we could tweak something. And I think that having a network of coaches and working together, because realistically, like, there's plenty of room in the pool, and I just think that the most foolish thing that I've seen amongst, I won't name any names, but for anybody to kind of make the uh, prescription that their method is like the method, I'd be very hesitant to, to use them
Right.
as an end all be all in, in coaching, because not only is exercise science always evolving, the sport is evolving so much year by year
Yes.
that the way that you would probably coach, 2016 to 2020, where the sport was far more static and it was heavier, as to now it's almost going into like, I don't want to say it's like going in a direction of CrossFit, but it's much more. It is more like heavy CrossFit,
Yeah,
where,
yeah, yeah.
there's a lot more moving, there's a lot more loading, there's a lot more. The weights are lighter, speed's more important. So, as a coach, you have to have the ability to adapt to your athletes and adapt to, their needs as they progress as athletes, while also being able to adapt to the sport as the events change and as we're seeing new and cool stuff. And it's really fun. So I guess what I'm getting at is like, I've seen coaches that like do things the same way for year after year after year, and that's really not the rub anymore. Like, you need to be able to stay updated on all the new stuff, and there's so much information out there, and being able to discern what's bullshit from what is actually creditable, new findings is tough. But if you're if you that's where having someone who's experienced in the game comes along, because I mean, having been someone who's been doing this for so long, you can kind of look at like a new something and be like, yeah, there's really not a whole lot of like science behind that to back like they're claiming that it would be effective.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm always very I always want to try to do the best by my athletes and really make sure that most of the things that I have my athletes do is things that I either try myself first or have done in the past.
For
So
sure. A
I'm
hundred
not going to
percent.
take someone's word at it and just be like, yeah, do this,
Yeah,
because
right.
you know
Right. No, that's a good point. And like you said, stuff's changing so much. Like even with like nutrition and water cutting, even water cutting, like some of the bigger water cut coaches like 10 years ago, so much has changed and evolved. Like I just took Matt McKeegan's water cut and nutrition
Mhm.
certification, like because he's like to me, like really well-read guy. And like I was really surprised at some of the stuff and like some of the facts he had to back stuff and the real world application. So it's just like goes off what you're saying, just like learning
Yeah.
stuff.
I mean, thank God I haven't had to cut since 2016. So, and I never
Yeah,
plan to cut again. So that's
yeah, for sure. It's yeah. But it's like, too, just to kind of rewind on a couple things too, is that, you said like any coach that has like a one program and there is a difference between a program and a methodology.
right.
People have methodologies that they can, have programs within and
Mhm.
it's changing for people. But like any coach that I see gatekeeping, I really puts up red flags to me because
Mhm.
like are they are they gatekeeping because they came up with something like that no one could ever think of and it's super revolutionary? Or are they gatekeeping because they're insecure and they're, scared for whatever reason to share ideas? Which one is it? And maybe it is revolutionary, but when a trend that I've seen is that every good coach and athlete that I've met 99.9%, they're more than welcome and willing to talk about it and share ideas and
Yeah,
say,
absolutely.
this is,
Yeah.
I mean, Terry Rady's one of the most popular strongman coaches. I mean, I have no idea how many clients he has, but he has a shit ton of them and he has a shit ton of
Mhm.
really good clients. We had him on the pod, I think I stayed on after the episode with him for like an hour because I asked him a follow-up question on how he programmed sandbag toss, and he
Mhm.
literally broke it down to me for like an hour and told me where he came up with these ideas and gave me a book to read. And it's like,
Sweet.
dude,
There you go.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, and now I apply that to people that I coach, like those ideas. And it's like, I don't think Terry's hurting because he shared them with me. So it's like,
No, and I mean, I think it's a somewhat immature thought process to not want someone else in the sport to get better because you think you're doing yourself a favor. Like,
yeah, yeah,
I think if we become better as a culture and more accomplished as athletes, that's only going to grow the sport and bring the sport to bigger and better places. The
right.
bigger and stronger we get and more impressive stuff that we do, the more eyes are going to be drawn to the sport, and the more that this sport is going to become not so niche and become a more viable
Right.
asset in order to actually have it be like a professional sport.
Yeah.
So
Hey, let's tie it back into fishing. A high tide rises all ships'
all
boats, right?
ships, exactly.
There
Yeah.
you go.
So
But no, and like that's really interesting that you say that is because people shit on CrossFit and it's sometimes it used to be a lot easier and sometimes it's still easy to do and a lot of them are friendly jabs, but a lot of them are people that aren't very good at strength sports and shit on CrossFit because they think it's like cool and funny, but it's
yeah,
like you can't deadlift 500 and like the best guys at the CrossFit Games are deadlifting like 600 plus.
right.
So it's like but they're also run a 5 minute mile and but so, you talked about strongman evolving, and it's like, because I think people don't realize how far we still are kind of from it, because it's like a couple companies putting all the money into it, and
Right.
because you're a Cerberus athlete, right?
Right.
It's like when I've talked to Ken a couple of times because he supported, like, we run the Northeast Regional for Strongman Corp. And like
Hmm.
every year, like the 3 years we've done it and all our shows, like he's always like come forward and, given us coupons and gift cards for the athletes and discounts for us to have sandbags and stuff like that. It's like I talked to him, I'm like, man, you guys do so much. He's like, do we really? I'm like, I don't think you realize how much you guys do, like the couple
Yeah.
companies for the sport. It's incredible.
I mean, I've always, I mean, I have a great relationship with Ken. I mean, I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
he's a really good dude, and I'm really grateful for all the opportunities that he's given me. And I mean, I used a lot of Cerberus products even before I became a Cerberus athlete. Like, I don't.
yeah, yeah.
And it's funny because like I'm just blatantly honest to a T. Even like I'll promote the products that I use that I think are great, but like, and Ken knows this, so it's not like I'm like saying anything like
Yeah, yeah.
revolutionary here, but like there's a couple things that are Cerberus that I don't particularly care for, and I just don't use, So I which I think that it means more if you give your honest opinion about the products and about the company rather than just like blanket being like, oh yeah, like everything Cerberus is the best on the market blanket statement. It's like, well, people know you're full of shit if you just say that. So I
Right,
mean,
right.
your credibility as an athlete and using these products and because it's basically what we're doing is like we're testing the stuff out in a competition setting, and Ken is so receptive to. He's always asking us about like, well, what do you like, what do you don't like, what can we do different, what can we maybe so he really does, as far as trying to provide the best stuff that he can. He genuinely wants to do that and be the best provider of equipment for the sport, just to again, and like Ken's competitive in that aspect of being having the best equipment, having the best gear, and competing with all the other companies, because there's two or three other really big names that Cerberus
Yeah.
compete with. And I think that Ken definitely has like a true passion to build the brand, be the best, and make the sport a better place as a whole. So,
Yeah.
and that's
So,
a big reason why I enjoy working with the team that I work with and being a Cerberus athlete.
yeah. Well, that's cool. I look at it from like an economist's standpoint is like how long can these couple companies support before
Mm-hmm.
like the bubble pops? It's like, so what do you think it's gonna take for Strongman to kind of take that next step and be more professional, get more real, like, because I don't think people like Strongman does not have real money in it yet. Like it's
Right.
not close to real money. You can do like a cornhole tournament and there's a lot more money in cornhole. Like a lot
Well,
more.
Strongman has real money in it if your name is Mitch Hooper.
Yeah. Oh
Other than
yeah.
that,
No, okay. No, yeah, no, okay. I should have said okay. No, that's actually correct. Cause like I mean, World's Strongest Man is real money. Don't get me wrong. Like
oh,
I'm
100%.
like, but I mean like
But here's
that
here's
trickle
here's the
down.
here's the problem even at the top, right? You know, obviously, I mean, Mitch is the guy in the sport right now, and everybody's
Yeah, for
chasing
sure.
him.
Yeah, yeah.
So he takes all these top level shows and takes the top prize money, and the fall off from first to second and third, no one else is making a living because there's just not enough money to go around.
Yeah.
So I think that as far as making this uh viable, so that the top, I would consider strongman an actual mainstream sport when the top 100 guys can do it professionally and that's all that they do.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
right now, the top 100 guys, I mean, you had guys at OSG that were, I mean, you look at like the Rayum brothers. I mean, Gabriel Rayum was in World's Strongest Man finals 2 years ago, came in like 30th at OSG, which just
Yeah.
goes to show how incredible the standard is right now. And all those guys, there was like 50 guys in the open class, and the guys in the top 20, oh yeah, some of them are probably making a couple bucks, but like 21 down, they're not making shit in this sport, you know? And
Yeah.
they're,
And
for
there's
all intents and purposes, at the top level. So,
They're literally,
um,
yeah. I mean,
yeah. So,
and there's to on the other hand, what you said, there's guys in that top 20 that aren't making shit. Like literally,
right.
I
Yeah.
mean, nothing. They're paying the entry and
Right.
only, and they're
Yeah.
going back to their job.
That top 20 is just the guys that have the ability to maybe go to the next, the bigger
Yeah,
shows
right. Yeah,
and
no,
really do some
100%.
damage. So, I
Yeah.
mean, and I think that it's tough because I think that what it's going to take for this sport to go to the next level, in my opinion, and again, my opinion means fuck all. But if you're listening to this,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
listening to me, so you care about my opinion. We need to have some kind of standardization where we need a governing body, we need a commissioner, we need a rule book, and right now it's like you look at the difference between the top four shows, and if you really break it down, if you look at World's Strongest Man, the Arnold, the Rogue, and Strongest Man on Earth, the difference between the Rogue and Strongest Man on Earth, it's almost, they're so far apart. It's almost two different sports, almost, it's like, and it's crazy. And that just goes to show what a versatile athlete Hooper is to be able to acclimate to whatever he needs to do to win.
Yep.
But it's so tough because it comes down to, I really think that what this sport needs to make it mainstream would be a billionaire who is a huge fan of the sport that wants to take that 5-year financial loss and build something really, really special,
Yeah.
kind of like, and I mean, I know it failed
Yeah.
because
I
it
know
was a
what you're gonna say.
copycat.
I know
The
what you're gonna
what
say.
do you?
Yes.
I was
Ragnarok
gonna,
games.
well, no, I was
Oh,
gonna
I
say
thought
that,
you were gonna say the
but
Ragnarok games because they
I was
had
I was gonna I was gonna say what Vince McMahon tried to do with the XFL.
oh.
You know,
Oh,
um,
I thought you were saying because like I'm pretty sure Ralph Avalon, who in jail now, I think maybe
he's
out, but
yeah he's
but dude, if
which is
anyone
funny you
wants,
mentioned that because I want to touch on that real quick.
we
Um,
had him on the pod multiple times when he was like promoting the Ragnarok games and like
yeah,
I mean the money ended up being real.
the
I mean
money was
because you
very real.
went,
I
yeah.
cashed the check. So
Yeah, yeah.
um,
And but definitely a con artist and I think he was just a good salesman to get people with bigger pockets to
yeah.
support,
So
you
it's
know.
funny because the Ragnarok games was financed by another guy. He was a
Yeah.
Greek guy. We went out to dinner with him the
Oh,
2 nights
really?
before yeah, we were speaking Greek. We went to a Greek restaurant. He loved me, which is why after the Ragnarok games, he wanted to do that American Deadlift Record Breaker series. And I
Yeah,
sat
yeah.
down with him and Ralph, and he asked me, he's like, "What monetarily? What would it take for you to try to peak for a deadlift record?" And I was like, "I don't know. I mean, how does 5 grand sound?" And he looks at me and he's like, huh, "Niko, 5 grand. Let's do 20,000." And I'm like, "Okay, no problem, man." So that's how that thing all kind of came in. But I know that, so there's a lot of people that are super critical of Ralph and hate his guts, which in my opinion, everyone's entitled to their opinion. Hate him all you want. But there's a
Yeah.
lot of people that have recently, like, since he got picked up for assault and he's now facing all these charges and litigation, there have been people that I've seen that like try to shit on the athletes that have competed for him and be like, "Oh, this is your daddy. He got locked up." And all I
Yeah,
have
I
to
don't
say,
agree with that.
well, all I have to say to that is, can we at least start with being in agreement that Ralph Avalon is not the only strongman promoter to be a scumbag? Like,
Yeah, yeah. And yeah,
throughout
I
the
don't
years, there's been whole different levels of scumbaggery from
yeah.
a lot of different promoters.
Oh, for
Um,
sure. For sure. I don't agree like I don't even really think he did anything wrong ever in Strongman. Like
No, I mean, to
Like,
be
because what
honest,
he
man.
said happened, but what the shitty stuff he did as a human was the like with the I don't know if you followed anything with like the North Carolina stuff, like the with natural disaster. Like he
Mhm.
lied about that stuff, which building homes and saving people's lives and stuff down there. Like that was a deep dive I went down for like weeks following that
Right.
stuff. But like, I mean, honestly, Ralph is like a promoter. I mean, shit. Like,
Look, I've said to anyone that has ever asked me about a show that I've done, I've given my honest, candid opinion on the show. And Steve Tripp is one of my best friends. He did Ragnarok
yeah,
games as well. And we were treated incredibly well. The backstage area was great. He brought in Magnus as a judge. He brought in top level guys to be at the show for World Strength Games. He brought in Jerry Pritchett. He brought in Hooper. He spent money on production.
yeah,
He had Michael De La Pava as his equipment manager, so all the kit was top notch. Um, you know, and I will still say that to this day, the Ragnarok Games and World Strength Games are the only shows that I have ever done where I've left the building that day with a check in my hand. So,
yeah,
um, as far as the experience at his shows, I really have nothing bad to say about it.
yeah.
Um,
No, I agree, man. It's more the personal stuff, but like you said, I mean, just be careful if you're taking shots at people for personal stuff because
well,
we don't
and
have a
here's the crazy thing, man. Right? When you look at guys like I would include myself in this crop of people. I would consider myself in that level of an athlete that is like you have the guys that compete in the big four, and then right under that, you have 50 to 70 elite level strength athletes that compete in these pro-ams throughout the year. And the opportunity for us to compete in shows with 20 to $30,000 podiums is few and far between, you know? So if a guy
Yep.
like Ralph wants to put up big money for a show like that, I'm not going to pass up that opportunity because someone doesn't like him, you know?
Right,
And as,
right.
as far as the people critiquing me about competing in a show with a promoter like that, well, you don't put an ounce of food in my daughter's mouth and you don't put a roof over my head. So it's really none of your goddamn business, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So I
Yeah.
mean, and quite frankly, if Ralph does a 3 to 5 year bid and gets out of jail and wants to put on another show with a $30,000 podium pot, I'll be the first one in line to sign up for it, bro. So and again, that just
Yeah,
goes back to like, dude, I give zero fucks about what people think about me, man. And
yeah, yeah.
I'm at the point in strength sports where there has to be something to motivate me to put my body through everything you have to put it through to peak and prep for these shows. And that either has to be guys that I want to compete against or the chance to make some money, you know? I'm done like doing things for the thrill of doing it. Like I've checked all the boxes that I want to check. I've competed at OSG, I've competed at Pro-Ams. I just I want to have, something that I can look at and be like, yeah, that's gonna get me off the couch, you know?
Right. Well, man, I didn't have Ralph Avalone coming up on my bingo card for this one. That was
Oh,
not
good,
on
man.
my outline for this episode in my notes. But man, I could go all day, but I think we're wrap up. We gotta have you on an episode in the future, maybe after the season airs.
Yeah, for
I think
sure.
nine episodes, right? Maybe we'll talk
9
about how it
episodes.
went,
Yep.
and then well, man, Harpoon Hunters out January 24th on Discovery at 9 p.m. Tune in. You guys just heard from Niko a little bit, and I think it's gonna be really interesting. I can't wait to watch it. I guess you get to watch too.
Yeah, it's gonna be
So
awesome.
that's gonna be crazy. But man, thank you so much. Make sure you guys are following Niko Greek Goliath. Is Instagram pretty much your main social
Yeah,
media?
it's funny because our producers for the show, they were just like, they're like, we want you to get like a big social media presence. We want you to do Twitter. We want you to do TikTok. We want you to do Facebook. And I'm like, all right, I'll
Yeah,
get on it. And then I just never really did. So,
yeah,
I mean, I'm not a huge like social media guy. I mean, like I post for Strongman and whatnot just because unfortunately it's kind of like a necessary evil of the sport these days where it seems like a lot of promoters at bigger shows care just as much about your Instagram following as your SBD total. But yeah, I mean Greek Goliath for Instagram, and then FV Easy Does It for tuna stuff, and that's pretty much it. So
Awesome. Well, man, thank you again for your time. Thank you everyone for listening. We'll see you next week for episode 216.